Harry's Wife, the Netflix trailer, number 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. As many of you know, after the roaring success of the first trailer, a second one came hard on its heels, and if you thought that the first one it would be a struggle to outdo it in terms of sheer mindfuckery, well, you'll be pleased to note that the second one has indeed achieved that. And here I am to explain it on a blow-by-blow basis of what it's actually explaining, what it's actually showing you, to be understood through the prism of her narcissism. Although, of course, the compilation of the trailer is in the hands of the production assistants, etc., and the editors of the series, you know that Harry's Wife will have had a significant hand in it all. Why? She's a narcissist and she can't help but interfere. After all, she's the most effective editor of film material and television material the world has ever known. Remember, she's a legend in her own lunchtime. And thus, of course, we're treated, as the trailer commences, with the sight of Ginger Bollocks driving in a car. Yes, driving along with his shades on. And we're treated to Harry's words of wisdom about it being really hard to look back and go, what on earth happened? Well, this just underlines his dim-wittedness and the fact that he has been fully subsumed in his emotional thinking. What happened, mate? You were ensnared by a narcissist, and you completely swallowed the poison that she poured down your throat. As he says that, we're treated to a look of a supposedly anxious Harry's wife gazing out of the back window of the car that she is travelling in. We're then treated to some delusion as a comment is made. You hear that. That is the sound of hearts breaking around the world. Yes, the deluded mindset that, of course, as I've told you about before, of the way that Harry's wife regards that every man wants to fuck her and that every woman wants to be her. And, of course, as an early introduction of the grip of doom, as we see her hand overlaid that of Harry. Of course, she regards it as a kind gesture of support, of affection. You all know, as a consequence of my work, that is a direct assertion of control over him. And then we see them strolling arm in arm, and the description that she's becoming a royal rock star. Yes, again, in her own mind she believed that. There's a picture of the two of them cuddling up together. Harry, with a rather strange grin on his face. I suspect at that point the old pink pods are being tickled rather than having tasers applied to them, as Harry's wife snuggles up next to him, utilising a benign assertion of control over him. Then there is footage of them walking along side by side. She's holding an umbrella here, as there's lots of photographs being taken. At least for once they're using footage of themselves being photographed, as opposed to using footage taken from elsewhere. We then get a repeat picture of them doing their star jumps, presumably in Africa, to demonstrate that they're relatable, fun people. Either that, or they were in some auditions to be Teletubbies. Perhaps we'll find out more about that during the course of the forthcoming episodes. We then have them at a royal event, Charles out in front, as they're walking along, and apparently someone says, Harry's Wife, we love you. I suspect that was dubbed over at a later juncture to make her seem popular. We get some flag waving that's going on, demonstrating a supposed popularity, and walking along, and she's obviously drinking in the fuel from all of the crowds. And then we're cut to another picture of them side by side. And then, of course, we see them having a kiss on their wedding day, as the ensnarement is complete. Harry, the hapless, intimate partner, primary source. So far, so staged, all making it seem like, look, everything was going swimmingly well, I was popular, everybody liked me. And then, and it uses those very words, and then, there is a picture of Harry's wife, her face dropping, another staged attempt at driving behaviour to induce a pity play. We're then told that everything changed. And there's a picture of the extended royal family on the balcony. One can see, of course, the Queen, Prince Andrew, Prince Charles as he then was, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as then was, with their 3 children and various other assorted members of the royal family that I needn't go through, and of course Harry and Harry's wife. And Harry then helpfully tells us there's a hierarchy of the family. Well, colour me impressed with this boy's knowledge. He can fail his A-levels or have somebody take them for him in order to try and get him into Sandhurst. But the fact is, when it comes to knowing what a royal family has, he understands there's a hierarchy. Of course, he describes this as if it's a monumentous new revelation for him, and that it's something that he wasn't actually aware about, and furthermore, that this is a bad thing, that he hasn't actually grasped the concept that within royal families, since they were created, that the king sat at the top, and underneath there were various positions, duke, earl, viscount, baron, and so on and so forth. And to him, he seems amazed that there's a hierarchy, underpinning, of course, his dim-wittedness. We then get treated to some footage of Buckingham Palace and some more camera lenses, and then there's a picture which shows Harry and Harry's wife walking away somewhere, and funnily enough, it looks for the first time from the picture that actually it might be the child known as Archie making a very rare appearance. One thing, of course, that stood out from the first trailer was no children, not even with their faces blurred out. Nothing. And you would think that those would be so important in their supposed love story, but they weren't provided. Harry tells us, you know, there's leaking, but there's also planting of stories. Well, you should know about that, Ginger Bollocks, because you and your wife regularly engage in it, spending those ill-gained PR dollars on the PR puff pieces that I so regularly comment about as a consequence of your wife's need to assert control over readership and viewership. We then see some printing presses. Ooh, that's to explain to us that there's lots of things being printed in case we didn't grasp that. And then we're told that there was a war against Harry's wife to suit other people's agendas. No, there wasn't. In actual fact, there was no war against her. How do we know this? The evidence suggested otherwise. The fact that she was welcomed into the royal family, that Charles walked her down the aisle, the fact that she was invited to Sandringham despite the fact that they weren't married, and other instances in terms of the staff of 14 that was assigned to help her. The royal family welcomed her. There was no war. However, what there was the fact that she invited lots of people to the wedding that she didn't actually know, that she only invited a mother to the wedding out of all of her family. There was all the shenanigans surrounding her father and her half-siblings. There were various rumours circulating about involvement in yachting, the fact that there were some nefarious suggestions about what she had been up to in terms of previous marriages and what she had done in them. The behaviour towards Trevor Engelson and the suggestion that she was married before him. And of course, where does this come from? Who generated this? She did. She generated it by the things that she said and that she'd done. And then it came to light. But of course, because that threatened her sense of control, her narcissism then steps in to say, I am being smeared. There is a campaign against me. There is a war against me. There isn't. The only war was the one that you created as a consequence of your paranoia and your need for control. Other people didn't have agendas. Of course, what they will have done is start to fight back against her own behaviours, but as you know from my excellent work, in those instances, her narcissism cuts the film out part way through, and therefore her provocative behaviour, which causes a reaction, is edited out, so all you see is the reaction, which she then labels the first provocation and claims to be victim. So this suggestion that there was a war against her to suit other people's agendas is utter hogwash and part of the victim mentality. We're then treated to another picture of her, where she sat in front of her expensive throw, wearing a jumper. I think she's attempting to look sad and show off the ring on her finger by wearing an oversized jumper with her hair scrunched up in a bun. It's not entirely clear if she's upset or whether perhaps she's stifling a laugh. And we can get her as usual staring straight at the camera in an attempt to draw everybody in to feel sorry for her. Then there's an individual who I don't recognise, but is clearly a member of the coterie that's brought in as a flunky to propagate this idea of there being a war against her to suit other people's agendas. And we see that there's somebody handing over a paper as if to say, this is an agenda, please go and use it. And the narrative continues by explaining it's about hatred, it's about race. And of course, as that's being said, and we all know, it isn't about hatred, it isn't about race. The only person that made it about race is, guess who? Harry's wife. The only person that's exhibited hatred is Harry's wife. Now, more and more people may well have begun to hate her now, but why? Did they just start out hating her because along she came? No. You might have got the odd Fruit Loop that would have adopted that stance, but the majority of people were, come on in, this is great, modernisation of the royal family, take a pew, you're very welcome. And we're giving her a chance, if not thoroughly welcoming her. But that, for many people, turned to displeasure, dislike, and with some people, hatred. Why? Because of the way that she behaved. And we're treated, of course, then to a picture of Harry putting his head in his hands, probably because he's just realised that he sat on the green crayon and broken it, and he's got all of that grass to colour in the picture that he was doing. Harry's wife is in the background, wandering into shop, holding an iMac, it looks like, as if to say, I'm going to bake some banana bread on this later. Is that what I use this for? And, of course, the individual that's telling us that it's about hatred and it's about race is none other than Christopher Boosey, who, of course, has tied himself now, although many people knew it was the case, to Harry's wife's camp, which will make it very interesting in terms of the litigation that he's facing from various parties, demonstrating the usual ineptitude from this grade A clown. And, of course, he makes it all about hatred and all about race, even though he can't see that she is a narcissist and it's her behaviour that causes the problem. But anything that Christopher Boosey has to say is an individual who's operating to fighting a war because he has his own agenda. Again, typical case of projection. Harry pops up again, looking relaxed and telling us it's a dirty game. At that point, many people may well be fearing that there's going to be some sordid revelation about what goes on in the Frogmore cottage after dark, that there might be some more roasting of the chicken, that the devilish spicy poontang and all of the associated deviant behaviours are now going to be explained as Harry tells us it's a dirty game. At this point, there's some footage that's showing again a press pack, which is probably not theirs, and it's explained the pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution. Perhaps they're going to explain about how difficult it was for Sarah Fergie Ferguson, or also Catherine, that they had their difficulties, and Sophie Wessex to begin with, but they got on with it. Of course, we know what it's all angling up to. There's going to be a mention of Diana, and as sure as the Pope is Catholic and bears shit in the woods, there she is. So some classic triangulation as a consequence of the Diana duplication by Harry's wife, and ensuring that Harry remains focused on bringing up his dead mother at any available opportunity, unlike his brother, as we see footage of her walking along. And she's been hounded by the paparazzi, but so far we haven't really seen any footage of Harry's wife being hounded by the press in the way that she suggests. And of course, there are then some shots which I do believe are nothing to do with Harry's wife, and are actually, as the Daily Mail explains, taken from when Katie Price, which, quite ironically, another huge narcissist, but we'll talk about that on another day, when she appeared at court. So, once again, Harry's wife's trailer is engaging in Porky Pies. In the first one, it used the press pack from a Harry Potter premiere and passed it off as if it being attention thrown at her and Harry. Here, we have the attention thrown around Katie Price, as if to suggest this is what the Sussexes have been dealing with. And it talks about a feeding frenzy. And then we see, once again, the newspapers and the secret sadness of Princess Di and Di's private battle, as there's yet more triangulation occurring. There's a picture, once again, of the nemesis looking stern. And then we see Harry wandering along with Harry's wife in front of a crowd. And apparently it's stated, I realised they're never going to protect you. We see them in the back of the car attempting to look concerned, as behind them there's some footage of a car which in all honesty, is quite laughable. Because if you look at the quality of the film of when they're sat in the car next to one another, and then the view supposedly from the rear windscreen, it's clearly two completely separate occasions. Indeed, the locations don't even look the same. But it's done as a car comes around the corner with its headlights on, supposedly being menacing. There's then more press scrambling, probably nothing to do with them, and we get treated to another picture, although it's a slightly longer one this time, of Harry sat there looking perplexed, probably thinking, oh, for fuck's sake, is she moaning and whining again, as Harry's wife attempts to wipe away the saline that's been dripped in her eyes by her flunky to make it look like she's crying. All staged. We then see that apparently someone was terrified and didn't want history to repeat itself. Naturally, Harry, of course, being told that time and time and time again by his wife as she manipulated his vulnerabilities against him in order to assert control with him. And once again, we see lots of newspapers whirring around. Whoever they've paid for that stock footage has done rather well out of these trailers. We see them walking along hurriedly. There are a few camera flashes. Goodness me. Quick, get away. Harry's now in a baseball cap, driving. Very important, that. Back to Princess Di, or Diana Princess of Wales as she was then known, because they haven't really got much footage of them being hassled by the paparazzi as they claim. But of course, it's important to remember that these are two very, very private individuals who have always sought and made it very clear they wanted their privacy. And since they declared that, they have done absolutely nothing to accord with that, ensuring that they pop up again and again and again and again. Why? Because Harry's wife is driven by her narcissism to do that, to seek the prime aims. But on with the trailer. More footage of Princess Di, and then we have some footage of them walking away in Buckingham Palace, presumably when Archie was presented. And of course, what is interesting there is that this is footage from Buckingham Palace, and they weren't given permission to film there. So this shows a breach of protocol, so I wonder if legal action might ensue. And then we're treated to Harry and Harry's wife. And apparently we're then told no one knows the full truth. But Harry says, we know the full truth. Well, actually, we all know the full truth because the pair of you haven't stopped flapping your gums since you buggered off from the royal family and telling us again and again and again about your story. And of course, nobody knows the full truth. Of course we do. We know that you're the victim and a mindless, brainless one of a narcissist. And we know as a consequence of the endeavours of many of the commentators picking apart the information that's put forward, and my scrutiny of the same through the prism of her narcissism, precisely what is going on. So, Harry, although you say with earnest honesty about that you know the full truth, actually we do. Because once you know that the person's a narcissist, it makes it very straightforward to work out what they're doing, what they will do, and why they're behaving as they are. There's a walkthrough of the trailer for you, but it's worthwhile now taking a quick stroll over to the Mail Online in an article by Rory Tingle, Jack Wright, and Rebecca English, which tells us Netflix versus reality. Latest Sussex's trailer describing war against Harry's wife as a dirty game uses footage of press filming Trump ex-lawyer Michael Cohen and Katie Price outside Crawley Magistrates Court. The first trailer showed footage from a Harry Potter premiere and a photo of when Harry was dating Chelsea Davy. That's when he was putting his hand up as to make it look like, please paparazzi, leave me alone, nothing to do with him and Harry's wife. The article explains a new trailer for Harry and Harry's wife's Netflix documentary uses footage of the press filming Donald Trump's shamed former lawyer Michael Cohen in New York. That's not mentioned in the trailer. There's no credit given to where it's come from, but it's to create the false appearance of them being harassed by the press pack. Another porky pie and a revision of history. And also Katie Price, outside a court in Crawley. Just days after an image in the first teaser was revealed to be a scrum of photographers at a Harry Potter premiere, and another dated from when Harry was dating Chelsea Davy, it's now emerged that parts of the second advert also aren't as they seem. A brief clip from the latest trailer shows a group of photographers rushing towards a concrete building which is clearly identifiable as Crawley Magistrates Court, where former glamour model Miss Price appeared last December to be sentenced for drink driving. "I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself," Harry says as the footage is played. "I didn't know he cared so much about Katie Price and her drink driving conviction." Another piece of video shows photographers huddling around a car, as Harry's wife says, referring to the royal household, "I realise they are never going to protect you." It then cuts to an image of Harry's wife dabbing her eyes, seemingly in tears. But rather than showing the Sussexes being hounded, the footage is in fact of Mr. Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney, leaving his New York apartment in 2019 to serve time in prison for financial crimes, campaign finance violations and lying to Congress. Mail Online has contacted Netflix for comment. So they've been outed again, and this demonstrates just how stupid they are, but reinforces his and hers low cognitive function and the way that she is driven by her narcissism to not care about it. She'll have seen this footage. She'll have seen it in the docuseries or approved the trailer, and will do so knowing that this is false information. And the hypocrisy of her and him as claiming to be advocates straining against misinformation when they engage in the very practice themselves. None of you watching this video are at all surprised by that observation. You know precisely what they are like. But yet again, this is demonstrative of the collateral consequences of her behaviour, the fact that she plays fast and loose with the reality that everybody else understands because of her narcissism. She sees nothing wrong with using material from elsewhere, character trait acquisition, but is also a revision of history because it uses press footage in relation to two different people and nothing to do with her. However, because it suits the narrative of showing her to be harassed and to be a victim and to make it all seem rather dramatic, it's included. Indeed, there's very little evidence presented of them being harassed. Why? Because nobody has done so. In actual fact, what has occurred is that whilst Harry talks about flashbacks from the flashes of the paparazzi, he's then quite content to go to many events where he's photographed by lots of people, but done so from a distance, behind a cordon, behind a barrier. The fact is, once again, these two bleat on about privacy, but they don't really want it. But Harry's wife, you must remember, because of her compartmentalisation, is allowed by her narcissism to say, "I want privacy," and then in the next breath to not actually engage in that behaviour, and she doesn't see anything wrong with that. Why? Because her narcissism says you are entitled to say you want privacy because you need to say that to assert control over people, but also you are allowed, because it's your choice, to then put yourself everywhere like a rash all over the media, because once again you're allowed to choose to do that subconsciously to seek the prime aims. And no, you're not a hypocrite, because we, the narcissism, will not allow you to see it. Many people see it for what it is, and that's the problem that she has. Her narcissism has not evolved sufficiently to enable her to stop engaging in these gaffes. And this Netflix series, whilst of course it will attract a lot of views, mainly from people wanting to stick the knife in, purely in the sense of their poor behaviour, not just some completely random dislike of them, it will garner the views. But actually what it will do is underline her narcissism, the fact that he's been led by the nose, or rather by little Harry, and that he's become complicit in her endeavours as the willing enabler of her activities because of his own emotional thinking and dim-wittedness. And it will show yet more lies, more inconsistencies, more revisions of history, more smearing. And it will all continue to backfire on them, as it's already doing so from the trailers alone. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.